life is good.
Preparing. And now
Music.
we get a message that says it's live, but it doesn't show live yet. But maybe it's live
I think
because
it's
it says
live.
it's setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. So maybe we're live. And oh,
There we go.
yes. And then also it always comes on with the volume on in the middle of a live stream. Why would it do that? Why isn't YouTube smart enough to go, maybe you don't want the volume on a thing that's got a delay. It's fine. We're live. Hi.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
Hi, welcome to the Folk Music Educator podcast, where Phil and Aaron don't know what they're doing, but show up anyway.
That's honestly, folks, that's half of the battle. Just show up with not knowing what you're doing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
education.
This morning, I helped a student change her strings. And she's just like, okay, so now I do this, and now I do this, and now like, she was super not anxious about it. And after the third string, I was like, I just have to say, you're like way less anxious than most of the students I help change strings. And she was like, well, why would I be anxious? I would be anxious if I was by myself, but I'm not by myself. I'm with you. And like, it was
No.
on Zoom. We're not in the same room, we're on Zoom, but she just had that, like, I'm not by myself. I don't need to be anxious about this. And I was like, oh, that is so
That's so
great.
cute. I love that.
We're showing up and we don't have to be anxious about it because we're doing it together and we're not alone.
Exactly. Um, Random question, but I think it'd be a fun aside. What are things that are super easy in in-person lessons that are infinitely more difficult online?
Helping people tune.
That was number one for me too. Tuning
Uh-huh.
is a pain in the butt.
Because
I
it's like,
have
man, if I can just get you in tune the first time, then you will be able to maintain it. But that first tuning can take so long of like, okay, tighten it. Nope, loosen it. Nope, turn the knob the other way. You need to keep picking the string while you are turning the knob. Don't just turn the knob. Oh, no, don't turn it that far.
I always tell students it's going to be a very small, like fiddle specifically because of the friction
Oh,
pegs. I'm like,
yeah.
it's very
Oh my
low. You
goodness.
don't do it very much. And I'm like, be pop. Always they just like put and turn it like a full, like half or
Well,
full
they're
turn.
hard
And
to turn. Friction
they're hard
pegs
to
aren't
turn.
like easy. Every once in a while, a mountain dulcimer shows up with friction pegs because all the old dulcimers were made with fiddle
Yeah.
pegs. And it's just like, okay, take a deep breath. You can do this.
That is a big one. Talk to a lot of teachers that live in New York or Nashville who talk about how their lazy days, the days where students are just feeling like, I can't do it. It's just like, okay, well, how about we just jam and play a little bit and we'll figure out what comes
Yeah.
in. And I'm just like, we have to do like a podcast or a TED Talk. And
Right. Well, a lot of times that's when I do creativity things with my students, where I'll be
same.
like, okay, play these two notes. Now play them with a different rhythm, or I'll do like a mimic, repeat after me. I'm going to play these three notes. Can you find those three notes on your instrument?
All that good
But yeah, you
stuff.
can't just sit and like jam nearly as much. It
Which is
doesn't.
sad, but it's okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I use backing tracks, like YouTube backing tracks,
Yeah.
to help them see how it works to do that. So we'll
Yeah.
like play the backing track and I'll mute them so it doesn't create a weird delay. So they're muted and then they can just start to play, but I'll start to play too so they can see like how does it lay over top. And then it creates that like also kind of judgment free space because they're muted so they can try it. But some of them at the end will be like, I don't know what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well,
It's
that didn't work.
exactly. So I love what we do there, but I do have to admit one thing that has been fun is that my I notice that students tend to be far more independent a lot faster. Like
Mm,
there were some students
mhm.
that I had that I'm just like, man, I think the only time this instrument gets tuned is
is
during the
at the lesson.
lesson because you know
Mhm.
I'll do it for you. And now students are like, oh yeah, it's just something that I do, and
Right.
yeah, so
Right.
it's great.
Yep. I have to do it. I know when I've talked to hammer dulcimer teachers, they actually say like the students don't necessarily have to tune as often though because they're not taking the instrument in and out of their house all the time. So it stays more stable by just having it out all the time and they're practicing more consistently because they didn't have to put it in the case to take it to their lesson and then come home and unpack it out of its case in order to
Yeah,
practice. So I think that's an interesting kind of component that none of us anticipated when we started teaching online.
that is accurate. That's and
I mean,
it
I can remember like going to festivals and we'd be so excited to play and play and play and play, but you come home and then there's just like the pile of everything that you unpacked out of the car and it just stays in the pile for 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 days until you're finally like, okay, I'm gonna unpack the pile. And in that whole time, your instrument has been sitting in its case in the pile and not getting played. And so all of that momentum and excitement you had from the festival is just dissipated by the fact that there was a pile to unpack.
were you did you also have a thing because so my growing up, both places that I ended up living, kind of growing up in my, there was not really a community of bluegrass, old time kind of nerds nearby. There were older people doing it, but especially kids my age, nowhere. And so when I did get to go to like Rocky Grass or Gospel Grasses or any of these things, or like the Hotchkiss Festival, I think where we met, it was so much fun. It was so nice to see faces that were as young as mine enjoying this music, and we could be
Hmm.
nerds and dorks and all those things. And then I'd go home, and oh my god, I'd get so sad and depressed for like a
Yeah.
week. My parents were just like always like preparing me the day, like the Sunday of the festival, like just know by like tomorrow or Tuesday you're going to be really sad.
Well, I remember crying myself to sleep on the last night of festivals because it was
Oh,
over.
it's so
I'm like,
you're exactly right. I remember when I went to Rocky Grass back in 2021. I did a giant road trip from Vegas up to Lyons, and what was really interesting was I went through my hometown in the town like I was born in and raised like in the those first 14 years, and I was there, and it was interesting to see them and all that stuff, but it didn't really activate that like hometown nostalgia as
mm-hmm,
much as walking around the festival grounds at Lions did. I was like,
mm-hmm.
oh, this temporary town, this temporary boulevard that only exists 1 month out of the year, that's
Yeah,
where like that has hometown feeling to me.
yeah. A couple years ago, I went back to teach at Mountain View, Arkansas, which is one of the places that we consistently went for the Dulcimer Jamboree. And there were
Yeah.
like a lot of kids came to that one, and lots and lots of childhood memories there. It was like as soon as I walked into the grounds, it was just that wash of all of those childhood memories
Yeah.
about making music and I'm sure wreaking havoc. Like I remember one year and it's so I think it's so powerful because it made me feel really special as a kid. They have at Dulcimer festivals, instead of like bluegrass festivals tend to have like lots of little jams, and so every little nook and cranny will have a 3 to 5 person jam in it. And at the Dulcimer festivals, there tends to be like the one huge mega jam. So it's a little more like a big giant Celtic jam or like a big giant old time jam. And you've got this
Yeah.
huge circle. And there were a group of us teenagers, and we were in the circle and we must have been being rowdy. We were just, like play it a little faster, add more stuff. Like we were just making it so that the people who know how to do it at this level were probably not having a good time. I couldn't perceive that at the time, but I'm sure that's, in hindsight, I can see
Uh,
that's what happened. And in a quick like exchange between several of the teachers, they organized so that a few of the teachers took all of us aside and started a little small jam with us. And they did it in a way that was like, hey, you guys seem like you're just like doing really great. Do you want to have like a special jam with us? And it made us all feel like we were like cool and important and like the teachers want to jam with us. And it also facilitated a way that we were not disruptive and taking over the regular jam. And I
uh,
just think like there were moments like that where people just really went out of their ways to encourage us and also like make a space where we fit. And I feel really grateful for all of that. So, nostalgia. It's all there.
no, I've definitely lived a lot of those similar kind of experiences because, like, I don't know if other my dichotomy of this space is definitely like looking at the classical music like
Hmm.
side. That was the other side of the coin for me. I don't know if they're connected, but you know what I mean. Um, and I'm looking at those guys, and I was like, I had my teacher, and then there were other people that I interacted with, but they weren't really teachers or educators in the same way. Like a conductor, I guess you worked with a conductor a little bit, but never really
Hmm.
one on one. And but like in these spaces, I was like, man, there were so many people that were really instrumental into my upbringing as a musician through jams that we did, through just like being in a space, like in a shared space together. Like a lot of these guys, I don't remember their names. A lot of them do all these things, but it's
Hmm.
just like, man, the amount of there were rules that you had to learn. You know, you if you wanted to participate in the old people jams, you had to behave, you had to do all those things, but you were still kind of included, and it was I don't know, it's that empathy of community, that responsibility of community, I suppose, is probably even a
Hmm.
better way
Hmm.
of describing it. I have to admit, I am not. That is one thing that I'm trying. My biggest struggle as a teacher is that I have a lot of skills of naturally giving that type of empathy and patience to people of my age or older, or even in
Hmm.
like 20s and older. Like that is a but I really struggle to provide that same type of patience for a younger generation. And and
Interesting.
I there's a couple of to me there's a couple of reasons. Like I remember there were times that I would go to music festivals where it was anyone who went to bluegrass festivals. There was usually some sort of tradition of um, the stars of the festival picking out a young kid or a couple of young kids to bring up on stage to perform
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
show off. And I remember one in particular, they shall remain nameless. They invited like 12, 16 kids to go up. And I was kind of singled out as one of the ones not doing it. And I remember feeling very annoyed and upset at the time. And now
Yeah,
looking back,
sure.
I'm like, okay, all of those kids were like 16 to like 18. And I
Yeah.
was like 13 or 14. I was a much younger person. That gap didn't feel as big then. I was like, why am I not included? I was like, okay, you were
Hmm.
almost a different generation of kid at that point.
Uh-huh.
But I remember feeling really discouraged and for a long time not doing it.
Hmm.
And also, there was a lot of times where I see kids of that age that were kind of borderline, kind of taking advantage of in a lot of ways. Like the that idea of prodigy ended up kind of does a lot of more damage than harm in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
so I'm mostly like, I'm like, I want you to interact with music in a healthy, benign, fun way. I don't
Yeah.
want to push any of this industrial kind of thing on you.
It's really interesting because I do a lot of teaching kids
Yeah.
and trying to find that kind of balance space between making them have sort of recitals and performances because there's some things about the experience of performance and public speaking and the younger you are when you first start to do it, the easier it is to do that and to have those skills, which I think are actually valuable human skills, the ability to be able to speak in front of a group of people or to be able to sort of have a presentation of a thing.
Yeah.
And also, people like my mom who never played an instrument because they got on stage once, got so nervous that they never wanted to do it ever again or have an experience of a teacher or have an experience of like not being the one on the stage or whatever. And so I have started trying to organize some online events and make them like fundraisers for things in the community. So there's an element of
Ooh.
like community service to
Yeah.
it, and it's totally and completely optional. You play if you want to play, you choose how many songs you want to play, you choose what instrument. Like, I'm trying to find this middle space of like providing the outlet for that and the opportunity for that and not pushing. And it's a feels like a really fine line to walk. And what's interesting to me, so I'm in the process of organizing the second one of these. And what's interesting is some of the kids who are like, "Yes, I want to do it," in the first one are like, "No, not really. I don't want to do this one." And some of the kids who are like, "No, not interested," are like, "I want to do that."
Yep.
So it is not even like every kid every time has the same kind of perspective on it. It's like in a different season, in a different place with a different song, whatever it is. I don't know. I can't figure it out yet. But I am trying to kind of find that space because you're right. Like I've heard all the stories of people who are really disappointed if they didn't have the opportunity to get on the stage and do the thing. And then I've also heard the stories of the people who were so pressured into constantly performing, and it was made into this like really big pressure thing that they never wanted to pick up their instruments ever again. And
Yeah.
there's got to be something in the middle, I think, I hope. And I don't think that any of the teachers on either side of that are intentionally causing harm, right? And I'm probably going to do something along the way that later on a student is like, "Oh my gosh, my teacher," and some terrible eye rolly thing. And I'll be like, "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to do my best."
I heard of a story of this poor friend, of this poor lady who was taking cello lessons during the pandemic. And they had to do their cello recital. It was a group cello recital. And the way that they had started, it was only like they had been taking lessons for like 7 weeks. So barely getting footing.
Yeah.
But they were the newest student in the teacher's studio by a long time. And the way that this teacher had structured their recitals was is they would play through the Suzuki book 1 or book 2. It might have been all, and as soon as you got to your last tune that you've done, you would go and sit down. But everyone was continuing playing until it got to the last students who had been there the whole time and playing the last one.
Oh.
Yeah. And so even
So
the
you're
big,
not doing a solo as a new player.
you're not doing as solo as a new player, but as you got went on, you became more and more soloistic until you got to you were the
Yeah.
last kid, and by that time you had
Uh-huh.
gotten to warm up at all, and everyone got to. But one thing that the teacher hadn't really put together is this lady was 26, 27, and walked into another thing where the next oldest one was 11. And just these kids are just wiping the floor with her because she's like so
So new
new.
to it. Yeah.
And she
I
was,
remember my childhood piano teacher. We did recitals, and all the kids were required to participate, but she had adult students, and they were always allowed to opt in or out. And she would always let the adult students play first
mm,
and talk about, like she would always do a little thing about how much harder it is to come into something as an adult and the amount of bravery it takes. And so the adult students would always play first, and then the kids would go from youngest to oldest. So yeah, but I can remember even as a kid being like, wow, this must be really awkward for
yeah,
for an adult who's like brand new to it, and I'm like a sixth grader who's been playing since I was 5.
yeah. And I think that's always been kind of I guess one of the main reasons I don't necessarily feel all that much guilt for not building more infrastructure for
Yeah.
doing it for kids. It's like all of the all of the infrastructure here, like in this space, is almost exclusively built for kids. Or like I was like, this is kind of a
Mhm.
space that I could help build up a little bit.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It's a unique challenge to do because like what I it's changing a little bit now, but I remember back when I was growing up, it was there was still a lot of focus on competition kind of vibe. Even when I loved going to the festivals and I loved seeing my friends, but there was still a kind of underlying cadence of where is that hierarchy, that top
Yep.
down hierarchy of players who and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the time it got supported with um, the festivals usually had a competition, guitar or fiddle or all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
as a competition winner yourself, like it's this way to engage with the work and all that stuff in the community and all that. But I definitely like I've noticed that in a lot of times it brings out that competitive nature can kind of bring out the worst of us, especially.
And it's so interesting too, because that also really depends on personalities a lot. Because I
Mm-hmm.
remember the first fiddle camp that we went to as a family. And we had not ever been around any other kids really who were playing fiddles or dulcimers. Like this
Yeah,
was the kind of early part of us discovering the bigger, broader community. We only knew like the local community, and there weren't any kids in it. So we were the only kids, and we got a lot of attention because we were the only kids, and we got a lot of praise and accolades because we were the only kids. So
yeah.
we were the best kids that there were. We were for sure top of the game in our little local area. And we went to a fiddle camp, and my sister got put in the like novice class and not the advanced class after they listened to everybody play. And she was furious about it because she's really competitive. And
Yeah.
she was like, I am better than that. And she went home and practiced her little hiney off for a year so that the next year she would also be in the advanced class. And it was incredibly motivating to her. And I am not very competitive by nature. So I start entering contests and I go, there's other people who play my instrument, and immediately was just like, how can I meet all of the other people here? And I like built all kinds of friendships and had no real thought about whether I was winning or not winning or better or good enough. And I didn't even like, I was entering the contest just to check it out and see what it was about, and I had no expectation of ever placing. So, it's just interesting because, like, all of us carry in all of our personality quirks and all of our
Yeah.
other things too. And so a situation that can be really healthy for one person and really inspiring and motivating, and you're just like, all right, that was it. I found the key to unlock motivation for these kids, is like the same place that is totally devastating for another kid, which is what makes it really tricky, is that we really need,
Oh yeah.
personalized, customized programming for every single kid, and every kid is not the same all through their entire lives, and it's really hard to predict all of that.
Oh, I remember whether it was kind of there was kind of an atmosphere where that behavior was fostered, for me. But um I remember I went and I placed third in the Rocky Grass competition when I was like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And I was so ashamed that I didn't get
Oh.
first. And like I got rid of I think I threw away the ribbon when my parents weren't looking. I don't know if I ever cashed
Hmm.
the check. I was so mad at myself. And
Oh.
and I like didn't even really like talk to the other people that were a part of it. It had just like
Right.
really um it
And
was one
that's
of
all
those
the
things that
internal dialogue that you probably didn't even say out loud, so
oh
probably
yeah.
no one knew it was happening.
Oh, it was terrible. And it always makes me so anxious and shaky and all that stuff. It's like it was always terrible. And so like part of me is like I'm like looking at the history of the spaces and festivals. Like it started with a lot of the fiddlers conventions and Galax, and even Ford like started a lot of these state fair kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And like for me it's like they are a technology of bringing people together. In a lot of ways it was a way to convince people to come and perform for free. It's like, hey, if you compete in the festival, you don't have to pay to get in.
Right.
Then that brought people to come and listen and all these things, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of mutually beneficial thing. And so I'm like, how can I help foster a better online community? Is it like, can I do an
Mhm.
exposition like of these things, like how to encourage these things that it's not a competition and
Right.
all that
Right.
stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna
Yeah.
I hope there's a through line for you, dear listeners, to hear. We've just kind of been
I
Tuesday
know.
is not
Well,
usually
so
our
I was
day.
gonna, I was gonna like steer us in a different direction for a second, because actually, right before we started recording, we were on a totally different thread, and I was, I was confessing that I'm really struggling with communication stuff at this point, where I'm like really behind on answering some of my emails, and I have discovered conflicting things that are going on, and I'm just working through trying to figure out how to not let myself get stuck in the shame spiral or the identity crisis of like, I am bad at this, and find out where the friction is and how I can begin to develop strategies and systems to like overcome this thing that I'm feeling very much like I am a failure at this moment. I said to you, I feel like I'm a good communicator, but I'm bad at actually doing the communication. So if I communicate with you, it's probably really clear and it's probably well thought out, and I spend time on it. And also, there are probably things that are not getting communicated at all that, you know, should be
I think
getting
one of the things
communicated.
that's hard is like you're exactly right. If I'm thinking of like the top 10 people that I'm like are very good at communicating and advocating for themselves and others and all those things, you're high on the list. You're also go if I need a quick answer in a text message, you're not on that list.
Nope. I am not on the list.
I'm just like
Or
she'll
phone or email.
I'm like she'll get to me when she gets to me. And that's totally fair. And I think there's a lot of ways to I think there's a lot of ways that we can like cover that up with different things. Like for me personally, like one of my favorite things that's helping with everything from cleaning to emailing to all that bureaucratic stuff is that I will set a timer for 10 for like 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm just going to work until that timer is done. And if the timer is done and I need to move on, I move on. If I can repeat the timer, I repeat the timer, and I'm just doing the one kind of thing, getting in that zone.
5 minutes is not very long.
5 minutes is not very long, but it's amazing how many things. How do I put it? Tasks are like goldfish in the sense to me where they will grow to fit whatever container they're given. If I'm given an hour to do a project, I will take the hour to do it. And if I'm given 6 months to do the project, I will do it in 6 months. I need to limit the amount of time because it's amazing how many things I'm like, oh, I would answer this in a 1 page essay I can do in 2 or 3 sentences. And
Yeah, brevity is not my gift.
yeah, it's a skill to practice, I've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was talking about like some people I know, they're just really good about saying, "I got your email and I'll reply to it in more detail when I can." And I have resisted being the person who does that because in my brain, once I've replied to it, it's now off the list because it has been replied to. And so then in my brain, I convince myself that I'm less likely to come back to it. But what I'm realizing is that by making it into a thing that requires a long response before I respond to it, then it sits there for too long. And then I get myself all like anxious about the fact that it's been
Yeah.
so long and feeling like I need to somehow justify how long it took me to reply to the thing. And then it takes me even longer because I'm trying to figure out this whole big thing to say about it instead of just having sent a reply that says, "Hey, I got your email. I'll get to it soon. Also, send me a reminder if I don't," would be a way better solution than just letting it sit in my inbox and like hold space in my mind about it being a thing that I need to sit down and respond to, which is another one of my inner dialogue things is like, oh, this is a sit down and respond email and not a send a quick note email. And I've used the timer method, but when I use the timer method, I give myself 20-minute blocks, which is plenty long enough for me to complete the whole spiral downward, far, far downward.
try
So it's an
try the smaller
interesting idea to try a 5-minute timer and see.
because it's I've noticed for me if I give myself 20 minutes, I'll take 20 minutes. If I give
Mhm.
myself 5, I'll get it done in 5. It helps that like ADHD procrastination brain of like, oop, got I got to do this thing in this time with the resources I have available. And um I don't know, that helps with me at least. And
Mhm.
there was a good thought that I was having as you were
Sorry.
talking, and I forgot about it. Oh no, you're totally fine. It was in
Was it
response to
something
what you were
about
saying.
responding, like replying quick versus replying long?
Oh, what if? Oh, I think it's in a book called "How to Keep House While Drowning." I've heard the quote, and I think it's from that book. I could be wrong, but it's the "Get effing real" test of a lot of our brains are like, oh, we like building systems. If I build this system of like, oh, I'm gonna put um, sock like I'm gonna put jeans and dress pants down here, then I'll put shirts and hood, blah blah blah, and create this system. It's beautiful and it makes a lot of sense, but it's not necessarily. It has so many buttons in our brain, in that the person goes, if you're trying to build a system, you have to throw it through the let's be effing real test of like, will you be able to maintain that system? Will you be able to maintain that thing and all that kind of stuff? And I've that's actually been kind of helpful for me because there's a lot of times you're exactly right where it's like I get the response, like I get an email, I'm like, this is going to turn into a thing. And a lot of the time, what I end up doing is I might not even say, hey, I will do this later. Like, hey, uh, I can't guarantee a good response via email with this. If you want to hop on a call, like a quick 5 minute call sometime this week, I'm happy to do that. I'll be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's been amazing how many times like students have very intricate questions about their lesson. I'm like, I can't answer in this email right now. Call me at 5 today and we'll talk for 5 minutes and I'll explain it.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't
Well,
charge.
and
It's
you know,
just
I have the button on my website that's like sign up for a 15-minute Zoom or phone call.
yeah.
And I, it's so funny because I have talked to my husband and several other of my like colleagues about how when I just tell people, hey, this would be perfect for a Zoom conversation. Why don't you use this button to schedule that? It's super easy for me. It's on my calendar. It creates the Zoom link and it tells me you have to show up at this time on this place and do the thing. And usually it's like a matter of I need to dig through my files and send them 2 or 3 documents. So we just do it in real time on the thing. It's so easy. I can explain to them, make sure that they understand what I'm sending them, and then it's done and totally checked off the list. And I forget that that is available to me, even though I created it to completely alleviate this very problem that we are now talking about. So I need like a super easy copy paste email template thing that's like, this would be perfect for a Zoom call. Sign up here.
Boom. Exactly.
That
I
could
th-
probably take away 1/3 at least of my email nightmare.
and honestly, like I remember, I think it was Cal Newport had a thing about how one of the guys had a hour. One of the guys he interviewed had like an hour drive at 5 o'clock every day, and he didn't necessarily respond to emails or have social media or anything. But if someone goes, hey, I have a question about this, that was just his office hours. And someone go,
Uh-huh.
hey, I have this question. He goes, that's a great question. That's a great question. Call me at 5 o'clock today. We can talk about it. Or all of his friends and family knew that he was always available at that time. And so they could call during then and just have kind of face, like on the phone, face to face interaction. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I think, honestly, I think that might be a system that a lot of us teachers can use. It's just like, not necessarily,
Some kind of office hours system.
yeah.
And I have it set up. I set up for myself office hours. I did that.
I did the
Good for me.
thing.
Now I just have to use it. Now I have to remember that I have office hours. And instead of trying to like feel guilty about answering
Exactly.
emails or not answering emails or keeping up with things. Hmm.
And
All
there you go.
right. Well,
Ideas.
gonna try that. Thanks. Glad we talked about that.
Yeah, I'm
And we
glad we
did it in
talked.
front of everyone. So now you know if you're struggling with something, and you're probably not alone. You're probably not the
That's
only
great.
one struggling with whatever the thing is. And it's so much better to just like not let yourself go down that like feeling terrible, like getting the third place and feeling completely awful instead of being like, wait a minute, I got third place.
I think,
I'm a good communicator. I just need better systems, or I need to be more consistent about figuring out how to implement. How do I communicate best? I know how I communicate best. It's like this, actually.
yeah.
Zoom is an incredible communication tool for me. It works so well. So I just need to use it.
Honestly, that's exactly the thing for me. It's just like, one-on-one communication was always better for me versus like a class dynamic. I was like,
Hmm.
if I could just meet up with you and talk for 5 damn minutes,
Right.
and it,
I
yeah,
just have one question. I just need 5 minutes.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
well, friend, I think we both probably have lessons to get running off to. It's going to be a
We
busy day.
do,
Man.
indeed.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for talking to
listening
me
to
on a
us.
Tuesday. I'm
Yeah.
off to Colorado on Friday. You had a friend in town
Yeah.
last Friday, so we're on a Tuesday schedule for this week anyway, but we will be back when we're back, either on a Tuesday or a Friday.
We'll be around. But thank you for listening to the Folk Music Educator podcast. My name is Phil Kramer. My co host is Erin May Lewis. And thank you so much.